Welcome back, guys. I'm Troy. This is Fox and No Christmas. Vlog number 11. Still really don't know how to introduce this whole segment. You think writing it down, because I have it here. This is Fox and Christmas vlog number 11, but do I panic every time I start? Yes, I do. Welcome back. It's time for us to continue on with our little sock ornament. So I changed a few more things today. I don't know if my head's cut off, but I'm going to do my best. I've changed a few things here today where I've increased the zoom on my phone right from the get-go, so that way when I zoom further in as needed, ideally it doesn't get as grainy as I think yesterday's video got. Yesterday's video was quite late. I'll tell you a little bit about that. So I recorded that on December 9th. And while I was uploading the 9th vlog up on YouTube, and as I was uploading that, and I knew that I needed to start editing it as soon as I could in the morning. So I got up early on Sunday, and I started editing there at 8. And because of like silly little things that I did when it came to like plugging different things into my computer, I plugged it in the worst configuration that caused things to happen so slowly that a video like that one should have only taken about an hour to actually like be created on my computer. It ended up taking well over 3. So when I started rendering is what it's called when you're actually making the final video to upload to YouTube. When I started rendering it, it said that it was going to take 30 minutes. I started at 10. I'm like, cool. I'll have plenty of time to go and just upload this. And when I have a quick moment between pieces or between like moving from Georgetown back to Charlottetown, take a couple minutes to just post the video and have that up and running before I went. When I went to go leave at basically 12:30, it was like 20 after 12 was when I finally left, which should have been much like way more time than I needed to upload the video, and it was still rendering, and it wasn't going to be finishing rendering for another 40 minutes. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that starting to upload to YouTube until I got home at 6, and then I posted it at 9. So that one's a little bit late. Apologize for that, guys. I will plan better for next weekend when I'm doing other performances with the Luminous Ensemble. So, moving right along, we're going to start with our gusset. So, where we left off here, and I'm going to do my best to keep this in the frame. Where we left off here is that we turned our heel, and now I'm at the center of my heel, center back, on my back 2 needles. As I was editing there yesterday, I realized that I was spitting out needle numbers, and I didn't explain what I meant by that. So what I meant by needle 1, 2, 3, and 4 is that when you pick up your needles, you've got, in this case, there's 4 needles. The first needle to the left, the first one that you'll be working from, starting at your beginning of round, which is here for me, that's needle 1. And then needle 2, needle 3, needle 4, working around clockwise. So needle 4 is the last needle that you will work on before you get to the beginning of your round. So sorry I didn't explain that. That's what all I meant by that. So now it's time for us to get into the gusset. So the gusset is actually pretty easy. All you need to do is for the bottom half of your sock, so that's needles 1 and 4, you're going to be working plain. And then for your top of your sock, so that's the part that people see when you're wearing them. If you're working with a pattern, you can go ahead and work that pattern. So where we started here, I was at the beginning of my round at the bottom half of my heel, and I'm going to work until my last 3 stitches there on the side. You can do the last 4 stitches if you prefer. I don't really find a difference between 3 and 4. It's just the placement of your decreases. So our gusset here is we're going to be decreasing those extra stitches that we picked up from our heel turn out. So to do that, we're going to work until the 3rd last stitch here in this case, and then we're going to knit 2 together on this side, and then knit 1. Just so that way you don't have that decrease right on the point between your needles. You don't have to worry about laddering there. because the laddering on a decrease is slightly more complicated to fix. So then you will then work across the top of your sock in pattern. In this case, it is going to be plain for this sock. Oh, sorry. I don't mean to keep scraping on my table. Okay, and then that was me working across needle number 2. So now I'm going to work across needle number 3. I hear my camera autofocusing over and over, but I'm not moving. And my tendency is to look at my phone because that's the camera that I tend to look at when I'm talking directly to the audience, to you guys. So I keep going back and forth. Anyway, so now that we're on needle 4, this is the other side of our heel stitches, we're going to do another decrease here in the gusset. So this decrease is going to be basically the same, just in reverse. So we're going to knit 1, so knit the first stitch, and then you're going to slip, slip, knit. And the reason why we're doing a knit 2 together on one side and a slip, slip, knit on the other side is just to make sure that the gussets mirror each other, so that way it just looks a little bit cleaner. You can swap out the knit 2 together with whatever decrease you want. You can swap out the SSK with whichever you want. If you want to do an SSP, which is a even cleaner version of the SSK, so that's a slip, slip, purl, slip, slip, knit. It's just a more complicated stitch. You can do that. I just like to go with slip, slip, knit because I don't have to think about it. Okay, so that's round 1. And then your next round, after doing that gusset decrease, you're just going to work plain, okay? Or you're going to work in pattern. So I've just finished needle 4, so I'm going to go down and work needle 1 again. And let me know down in the description if this type of lighting works well. I'm thinking, at least from my angle, I'm seeing a lot of shadows on my hands, but from that vantage point, it may not be as bad. I just noticed yesterday that because I turned my overhead light on and it's a different color of light, it made this main camera that I'm looking at right now, made it do weird things with the color where one side of my face looked purple and the other side looked orange. Anyway, so here, this is where I had decreased, so where I would be decreasing there, the last 3. I'm just going to go ahead and knit those 3 stitches for this round, okay? And then we're going to work across the top of the sock in pattern. So whatever pattern that you were doing before, since I was doing Stockinette, I'm just going to continue with Stockinette. And then all right, and then here I'm on needle 4 again, so I'm going to go ahead and knit plain. I'm not going to decrease this round. And there. Round 2 is just about completed for me. Just 2 more stitches after that one. There. So now round 2 has been completed. So what you're going to do is you're going to be alternating those 2 rounds. So the decrease round and then a work plain round, back and forth until you have the same number of stitches that you started with. So in this case, since I started with 32 stitches on my sock altogether, if I were to go and count my stitches here, it would end up being a different number. So I'll do that right now. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. So I had 14. 14, 28 plus 16 is 38, 44. So I had 44 stitches. I started with 32 stitches. So what I'm going to be doing is alternating that decrease round and my regular round until I'm back down to 32 stitches. So a couple of pitfalls that you might have fallen into here, which aren't that big of a deal, truth be told, is if you picked up a not even number of stitches, as in like you on one side of your heel, you picked up one more than the other side. All I do when I come to those instances is that when I go and I count my stitches there, if I did notice that I decreased, or sorry, if I did notice that one of my sides of my heel had one more stitch than the other, then I would just do an extra decrease as soon as possible in that, on that gusset side to even it out. If I was off by more than one, then I would like even out the decreases by decreasing by using like a bigger decrease number, so like a double decrease, or just continue to yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I've had one that was quite that off in quite some time. I would imagine that what I would probably do is add an extra decrease on one side, on the side that had two stitches extra, and then I would probably skip a decrease on a different part, or maybe do an extra decrease, and then when it comes time to finish off where I wouldn't have to do a decrease on one side, I would just do an additional decrease on the other side, just to even it out. If it's off by more than two, just rip it back. Ideally, it should be the same, but if it isn't, those kinds of minor mistakes like being off by one, possibly two, you can just fix that by decreasing a different number amount just to even it out. So that's not a huge deal. Another issue that you might come across is that if you aren't paying attention, you might miss a decrease. The perfectionist in me says go back and just fix it, because you'll only ever have to go back 2 rows. But the lazy person in me, I would just throw another decrease in there to even it out. Yeah. So I'm just going to keep working here until I have decreased down to 32 stitches in my case. If you are following along here and making a large sock, so like a sock that can actually fit on a person's foot, this is going to take a little bit longer for you because you would have added considerably more stitches than I have. But you just want to keep doing that until you have returned down to the number of stitches that you started with. So if you started with 60 stitches, then you're going to be decreasing until you have 60 stitches. So this next part here, if you are just a beginner and this is your first sock, you can go ahead and ignore this little bit information. This is more for the for more intermediate or advanced knitters when it comes to making socks. If you've made a few pairs of socks, then this is just giving you some more information on how to customize your socks. So if you're making a pair of socks for someone, if you get their shoe size, you can make a pretty decent pair of socks for them. The tips that you'll want to know to make sure that the sock is going to fit well is not only know what their shoe size is, but if you can find out what their circumference of their foot is. So that's like, I'm not going to take my foot up and show you, but like if you were to take a tape measure around someone's foot and measure it here, find out what that is, and what they are just above their ankle, find out what that is, so that way you can determine how many stitches you want to cast on for your sock. So if someone has a bigger calf, then you might be wanting to cast on additional stitches for the cuff and then decrease them out before you start your heel, just so that way it's a little bit more form-fitting. Another quick rule is that when you're doing all these measurements, you need to know what your gauge is for whatever yarn that you're working with. You need to know what your gauge, and you don't want to simply just plug the numbers into your gauge and that's how many you have. So you actually want to make sure that there's about 10% negative ease, is what it's called. You want to make your sock about 10% smaller than you think you should, just to make sure it's going to fit and it's not going to slide. Okay. So if I were to measure my foot circumference is about 9 inches around. So when I make my socks, I typically make a sock that's about 8.25 inches around circumference, based on my gauge. So when I'm using a 2.75 millimeter needle like I'm using right now, I typically will go 60. I used to do 64, but I find that after a sock has been worn for a little while, if it's just a plain sock, that it'll tend to stretch out a little bit, and I will have issues with it sliding down my foot. But if there's patterning in there, patterning like cables and stuff like that, that's going to shrink things. So that's, yeah, so I will typically make something that is about an 8.25 or an 8 inch, depending on the yarn, circumference. So if my gauge is 8 stitches to the inch, then I will cast on 64 stitches. Okay. So do your calculations with the measurements, not so much the stitch count. You might feel that the stitch count is more accurate, and it is, but that can get really confusing if you're trying to make a sock using, 61 stitches and trying to manipulate it into 4. Yeah, so just go to the closest grouping, go to the closest multiple of 4 for the size of sock that you want. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is if you want to make a pair of socks that is going to fit perfectly lengthwise, you can't really just go by the shoe size that you get from people. Oh, I missed a decrease. So I'm just going to do that because I'm lazy. You can't just go by someone's shoe size because number one, shoes are not cut the same across styles. So personally for me, like my sneaker size is like a 9 wide if I can find it. My dress shoe size is a 10 wide. And then I play in the intermediary there because I have stout feet, we'll call it. But the thing is that if I were to draw my foot on a piece of paper and go by the length of foot, it's a 9. Because the length of my foot is not great, but because I have wider feet, I need a bigger shoe size to accommodate that. Are there any other nuggets that I can talk about making socks? I don't know. Oh. Ha! As I was talking there, did not decrease on either side. I did a whole round where I did not decrease. Where I was supposed to. Anyway, so as I just did there, I just kind of like passed my slip stitch over for this sock because I'm not really super worried about this looking super clean because this is not like a professional pair of socks. This is not something that I would put on a craft table. This is just something that I'm using for teaching materials. So if you're just making a pair of socks for yourself, unless you want it to be as perfect as that, you can cheat and do those decreases like I have just shown you. So now this is a decrease row, so I'm going to go ahead and decrease. There. It does look a little bit different. So you can see like I did my pass slip stitch right here as opposed to my knit two together, so it does look a little bit different. But this is just going to go on a tree, so I'm not worried about it. Yeah. So the next thing, which I will describe normally on a pair of socks, the next thing that you would be doing is just working plain or working in pattern that number of stitches that you have decreased back down to. So in this case, once we get down to 32 stitches, we would be working plain in a tube just to make the sock long enough. And then you would be stopping short about 2 inches. If it's a smaller sock, you might want to stop about 1 3/4 inches short of the tip of the toes, because we would start decreasing for the toe at that point. This sock, once we finish the gusset decreases, it's already going to be long enough for us to immediately start the toe. So if you are following along and you are making a larger sock, like a full-size pair of socks in this case, instead of this little Christmas ornament, between doing the gusset, which is what I'm knitting right now, and doing the toe, which I will be starting momentarily, it looks like, you will want to be knitting rows plain, you want to be knitting rounds plain on your sock, on your 64 stitches or whatever you start it with, until your sock measured from the back of your heel. So you'll want to flatten out your sock, and you'll be measuring from the back of your heel here to about 2 inches shy of your toe. But for this little Christmas ornament, we're going to go right into the toe. Three, 4, 5, 6, 8. 2 more decrease rounds to go. So a little trick that I do when I am determining how many rows I need to do of my gusset is that I don't actually count all of my stitches, because the stitches on the top 2 needles of your sock, so that's needles 2 and 3, they should never change. They should always have 1/4 of your stitches on them. So in this case, since I started with 32 stitches, I know needles 2 and 3 have 8 stitches on them, so I never count them. I only actually ever count my back 2 stitches when I am decreasing out, because I know that I will be done when I have decreased out my my stitch count after my final decrease is 8. So before I did this decrease round, I had 10 stitches on either of my back 2 needles, my needle 1 and needle 4. So I just about finished decreasing here from 10 to 9. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly make that a reality. So I'm going to go and knit this, decrease. All right, so I have decreased. So now I have 9 stitches on my back 2 needles. So I'm just going to go ahead and, since I know this, I only need to have 8. My next decrease round is my last one. So I just need to finish a round plain here. All right. All right. I'll move my needle. Okay, so just did my last decrease on needle 1, so I'm just going to go and finish my round to get to needle 2. All right. And there's my final decrease. Okay. So now that as I mentioned, what if you're making a bigger sock than this little ornament, the next thing that you'd want to be doing is working plain on this amount of stitches until you're about 2 inches or give or take shy of finishing, and then you start decreasing for your toe. So just like there's a bajillion ways to turn a heel, there's a bajillion ways for you to decrease for your toe. The way that I like to do is just an angled decrease. I don't know if that's actually what it's called. It's just the one that I learned as a basic one. There are spiral decreases and all of that. But all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using the angle decrease. So this one, again, I'm using the context clues from where my needles are to, using context clues from my needles to tell me where I need to put my decreases, so that way I don't have to count. So the way that I like to do this one is that because I've got 4 needles, I know that I want to have a decrease on each needle, just where the decrease goes. So in this case, I'm going to be doing 2 decreases on each side to like flatten out the sock and suck it in and make that little pointed toe there. So the decrease works pretty much the same as we did before. We're going to knit to the last 3 stitches on our needle, and then on needle 1 we're going to knit 2 together and then knit 1, that final stitch, and again just to prevent laddering. But if you want to put your decreases there on the very edge, you can do that too. Just be wary that your ladders are easier to form and they are harder to fix. Anyway, so then on needle 2, what we're going to do is we're going to knit 1, and we're going to slip, slip, knit. Okay? And that way we've got a decrease on this needle as well. Okay? So needle 1, we work to the last 3, knit 2 together, knit 1. Needle 2, we knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit to the end of the needle. And then we repeat that. So on needle 3, we're going to knit to the last 3. And then of course, when you're working your sock, if you want to continue working in pattern, you can. I typically just go to stockinette stitch for the toe just to make things simple. So I'm at my last 3 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to knit them together, the last 2 stitches together, I'm going to knit the 3rd and 2nd last stitch together with a knit 2 together and then knit 1. And then just like needle 2, I'm going to start with a knit 1, slip, slip, knit, boop, boop. And then we're going to continue decreasing. Or we're going to knit to the end of the row is what I meant to say. And then we're going to continue. So just like we did our gusset here, we're going to knit 1 round plain. Oh. Okay. Sorry, camera needs to be restarted again. So as I was saying, just like we did with our gussets there, we're going to knit 1 round plain with no decreases in it to help make that 45-degree angle. And you're just going to continue repeating those 2 rows. Oh, I just picked up a row too low. There we go. You're going to keep repeating those 2 rows until you have 1/4 of the stitches you started with. So in this case, since I started with 32, I'm going to keep knitting until I'm down to 8 stitches. This is just a general easy rule, so that way if this is your first sock, you just want to make a pair of socks, there you go. That's your math that you want to be doing. If you wanted to have a pointier toe, What you could do is, yeah, let me reframe that, because I was just about to tell you the opposite of how to do this. So this is going to give you a bit of a pointier toe. If you wanted to have a more square toe, what you could do is decrease like I'm doing now, but you're only going to be decreasing until you have half as many stitches as you started with. So square toe, you go from, in this case, 32 stitches to 16 stitches. If you want a pointier toe, you go from 32 stitches to 8 stitches. So you're going from to a quarter of your stitches instead of half. And if you wanted a rounded toe, which is what I typically do on all of my socks, because I feel like they fit better. What I like to do for those socks is I do a rounded toe, where I will decrease until I have half as many stitches as I started with, in this fashion. So one decrease row, one knit plain row. And then once I get down to half as many stitches as I started, I just do decrease rows. Oop, I forgot my decrease. Oop, go quickly fix that. Okay, to do the rounded toe, you do this decrease method that we're doing right now. So decrease one round, and then you knit one round plain, and you keep repeating that. You repeat it until you have half as many stitches, just like the square toe. Okay, but after you've got down to half, what you're going to do is you're going to decrease every round down to a quarter of your stitches, and that just helps round out your toe there. And it just makes it so that way you also have fewer stitches to Kitchener stitch at the very end. Yep. So now I'm down to 6 stitches on each of my needles here. So I'm just going to go and continue working down. Oh, I split my stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to do another decrease round. All right. So those of you who are beginners, who are just following along this little pattern to learn how to make this little ornament, and you want to move to the next step to make a pair of socks for yourself, and you're wondering, how do I do that from here? So the easiest way is to find a free pattern online that will fit you. So I know Simone van Eiderstein from Sand and Sky Creations. She has a free sock pattern that she has on her Ravelry store. I will be releasing one of my free sock patterns here eventually. I just need to finish formatting it so that way it looks clean. So that will be there, but there's lots and lots of free sock patterns available online. Or if you just want to use the math that I've told you here to make your pair of socks, all you need to do is, once you're finished with your sock here, is you're going to measure your gauge. And the best place to measure your gauge is across the side of your stitches here, across like here in your cuff, that little gap here. And what you're going to do is you're just going to count how many stitches you have going across, ideally 2 inches if you've got 2 inches, but if you only got 1, then work across that that stitch. And you'll want to be very specific of how many stitches there are, down to the quarter stitch. So if you have a gauge of 6.5 stitches per inch, then you're not going to count that as 6, you're not going to count that as 7, you're going to count that as 6.5. And then you're going to times that by how big a round sock you need. So for me, I have a 9-inch circumference of my foot. I like to do about an 8.25 circumference. So I would take if I had 6.5, I would take 6.5 and times that by 8. And that would give me 52. So then I would be casting on 52 stitches. I will point out that 6.5 is a very loose gauge, so you will find that your stitches are probably higher than that. You'll probably find that they're somewhere in the 8, 8.5, 9 range. So just keep that in mind, okay? And I am not decreasing. Right? Yeah. Yeah, and then what you do is you cast on usually it's 64. If you don't want to work that math out, start with 64. Chances are it will fit somebody in your life, because that's the easiest sock to find a person who will fit the foot. So if you don't want to do that math, start with 64, and after you finish your pair of socks, then you will know whether or not that pair of socks will fit you. And then if it is barely too big, take away 4 stitches. If it's really too big, take away 8 stitches. Always take away or add in groups of 4. If it's too small, then add 4 stitches, so on and so forth, okay? Oh, and that has 6 stitches, so I missed a decrease last round. So I will fix that right now. Boop. And now I've got 5 in each of my needles. Anyway, so, and what you'll be doing is you'll just be following these instructions. So, and just replacing your starting number of stitches with any time that I'm referring to 32, okay? So you will be working, if let's say 64, just so that way the math's there. You can start with 64 stitches. Do your cuff in 1x1 rib, 2x2 rib, 3x1 rib, whatever you want, whatever tickles your fancy, for however long you want. And then if you're going to be doing a sock that just has cuff on the top, and like this one where it's only a little bit of cuff there at the very top, and then you're working plain, you can do that. If you want to go cuff all the way down to your heel, you can do that too. You just want to work if you're measuring on your foot, to the bottom of your ankle. So like where your ankle bone comes out, measure from that point up your leg for how long you want your sock to be. If you don't know, between 6 and 8 inches is usually fine. From the top of your cuff to the bottom of your sock. Keep in mind that when your sock stretches out this way, it gets shorter. So if you measure 6 inches, do 8. If you measure 4 inches, do 6. Just add 2 inches. Okay. And then when it's time to do your heel whichever fashion that you want. So we did a plain heel. You could do a slip stitch heel where you slip one, knit one across the row, and you keep doing that, and that gives you a little bit of a textured heel, which is what I did on my other sock here. So if we compare the two socks, this is the heel flap here. This has a very plain heel. This one, it's hard to see because of the yarn that I used, but if you look closely, I've got big stitches here, and then there's like a gap, and that's because I've got a bunch of small stitches in there. And then I got big stitches, small stitches, and that's caused by the slip one, knit one across that row. It is a way to strengthen your heel to help prevent holes. And if you're working with a yarn that does not have a strengthener like nylon, mohair in it, then that is what you'll definitely want to do to help make it so that way your socks last longer. If you have yarn that has nylon or mohair in it, you don't have to do it, but I still recommend it, just so that way you have almost no chance of holes forming. Anyway, so you do your heel flap. You're going to do that on half of the stitches that you started with. So if you started with 64, you're going to take 32 stitches, and mark that as your back half, and you're just going to work back and forth on those 32 stitches until you have done as many rows as you have stitches. So if you're working across 32 stitches, you're going to work back and forth for 32 rows. Then you're going to turn your heel, and you're going to use your beginning of round marker or the separation between needles 1 and 4 as your center point for your heel. You're going to work to that center point. Then you're going to knit one more stitch, do your slip, slip, knit, knit one, and you're going to turn. Knit to one, wow. Yeah, I think I'll, oh, and I missed a decrease. Okay, whatever. Yeah. All right, so to prevent this video from getting too much longer, we are going to finish off our little sock here, which now that I'm looking at it, I could have done a few rows to lengthen out the sock, but that's fine. So what we're going to do is we are going to break our yarn and we are going to finish off our toe. This time I'm not going to be doing a Kitchener stitch, which is usually what I use to finish off my rows. I'm not going to do that here because that's a lot of work for just a little sock like this. I'm just going to do the quick and dirty method of just sliding all my stitches. Oh, get it into frame. I'm going to do the quick and dirty method of just sliding all my stitches onto a single needle. Again, slide all of my stitches onto a thread, and I'm just going to pull it tight like I would for a hat. Okay? Boop. And then so I really should have continued decreasing from my sock because this little sock guy is a little deformed. But for the sake of brevity, we're going to pretend that I did do that and my sock isn't a little deformed because it's more of a triangle. Anyway, so that is your finished sock. So you're just going to pull it tight, darn in your ends, and what you're going to do for the end here to make this cute little twisted bow is that you are going to figure out how big. What you're going to do is you're going to take about 8 inches. I'm not going to measure it. I'm just going to eyeball it. And what you're going to do is you are going to twist your strand. Get this in the frame. You're going to keep twisting your strand to add more twist to it. Okay, and then once you've added some twist to it, so that way it wants to coil past itself like this. I hope that's in frame. What you're going to do is you're going to bring it back down here, leave a little bit of an extra tail, so that way you can tie this on and like darn it in later. And then you're going to straighten your yarn out again, and then you're going to redistribute that twist. So you're kind of like doing a chain ply, okay? So now I've got that little twisted strand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here, and I am going to tie this together, and I'm going to normally use a crochet hook. I do have one. So I've got a crochet hook. What I like to do is I will go back down to here, boop, and I'm going to grab that little loop end that I created from the end of my tail here, and I'm just going to pull that through. Did I make it through there? Yep. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little knot inside there with my other end of my thread. I'm just going to use my hook to pull it through there. Both ends, yeah, like so. And then pull. How you do this knot is not super important, but I am just going to knot this all together so that way it will want to stay together. There, knotted. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sew that together and finish it off. And once you've done all that sewing, again, for the sake of brevity, because this is getting a little bit long, once it's sewn all together there, you're just going to darn in your ends just very, 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 very loosely. This here, I didn't even darn them in. And you're just going to tuck that all on the inside of your sock. And then your sock is hangable. There you go. So if you enjoyed this little tutorial about how to make a quick and dirty sock, just make sure that you work between your gusset and your toe a few rows, so that way it's a little bit more foot-shaped and not triangle-shaped. But if you like that little tutorial, give me a like here on the podcast. And if there's interest in the new year at some point where there might be enough interest for me to justify a live stream where we just sit down and we'll just make a sock. Yeah, let me know. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.